welcome everyone. We don't have any actual participants here. Maybe they'll be joining us soon. But I just want to welcome you to the Meet the Mentor session for Sandrine Maugy. Is that how I pronounce your last name? Is that correct?
Maugy.
Maugy, sorry. Okay. Anyway, we're really happy to have this event and have you here. So I'm Olive Dodd. I'm your navigator or your host for today. And if you're new to Mastrius, we're an online platform that connects mentors with artists, providing a space for collaboration, mentorship, and community. We foster an environment where to be creative and turn artists into masters. So at Masters, you connect with many master artists like Sandrine Maugy. And have personalized teaching, feedback, and support, all in a non-competitive and goal-focused community. So today we're introducing Sandrine, who is a new mentor at Mastrius, and her group starts on the first Tuesday of every month, and from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. Mountain Time. And the first one starts on April the 7th, is it? No, or sorry, May.
Yeah.
Oh,
May.
yeah, May 7th. Let me get my calendar here. May 7th. I should have had that written down. And and each group has a navigator. So I'm Olive Dodd, and I'm navigating for Sandrine. And my role as a navigator is to ensure a smooth session for everybody, being the host, kind of the background behind the scenes, technology, and setting up of meetings and that kind of thing. And so for this meeting, we'd like it to be really casual. If anybody comes on, please feel free to either join in, unmute yourself, ask questions, or come in the chat or type them in the chat. Yeah, and if you're on the recording, if you want a replay on this, everything is recorded on the Mastrius YouTube channel, and I shall put a link for that in the chat. And so now let's introduce Sandrine. So I'm just going to share my screen. And there we go. So it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Sandrine, a master of watercolor medium and a revered voice in the botanical art world. Sandrine's journey in art blossomed for her love for gardening and a passion for vibrant colors, guiding her transition from botanical illustrations to painting, where she breathes life into contemporary plant portraits with her unique palette. As a mentor at Mastrius, Sandrine's approach to teaching is personal and intuitive, allowing her to connect with artists in a way that transcends traditional instruction. She brings her profound understanding of color science and water techniques to her groups, creating a learning environment infused with inspiration drawn from every hue of the color wheel. Her instructional prowess is honed by her years of experience, including crafting a botanical illustration course for the London Art College and teaching for the Society of Botanical Arts diploma. Sandrine's commitment goes beyond teaching. She's dedicated to supporting artists and recognizing their art and aspirations clearly, addressing weaknesses and bolstering strength. Her artwork adorns collections globally, and her wisdom is spread far and wide through her art blog, YouTube channel, Patreon site, and her published books like The Color of Nature and Botanical Watercolors Through the Seasons. And oh my gosh, I checked out the Botanical Watercolors Through the Seasons book on Amazon, and so blown away by it. I'm going to order that book for sure. It's just incredible, absolutely stunning. Anyway, so Sandrine's artistic signature is a blend of traditional botanical painting with a contemporary nuance and is characterized by her wet and wet watercolor technique, capturing nature's beauty with ethereal light and intense colors. Moreover, her ethical art practice is a testament to her respect for the natural world, ensuring her materials are cruelty-free and vegan-friendly. So brimming with accolades and global recognition, Sandrine remains grounded in her pursuit of artistic truth, captivated by the allure of color and sharing her gift up with the world one stroke at a time. Please welcome me in Please join me in a warm welcoming Sandrine to our Meet the Mentor event.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So off to a wonderful start. So Sandrine, yeah. So is there anything else you'd like to add to your introduction or about your background that you'd like to share?
Not really. That was pretty thorough with my background. Yes. Yeah. I think that about sums it up with the teaching and the books and the exhibitions and everything I do in botanical art.
Beautiful, beautiful. And so we have a demo coming up, but before we get to that, there's just a few questions we'd like to ask you. So what's your teaching style and what's the difference between teaching and mentoring?
So my teaching styles, I like to demonstrate a lot because I think describing something is one thing and the theory is fine, but when people see you actually painting, it adds another dimension. So I think demonstrating is quite good, but I also do exercises and assignments because again, you can watch somebody paint, but until you actually have a brush in your hand and you try the methods and you try the colors and you try the color mixing yourself, you won't really get it the same by just looking at somebody doing it. So I think it's important to practice a lot. So I tend to do workshops rather than demonstrations when I teach because I want people to have a go. I want them to experience the watercolors, by themselves because watercolor is a very lively medium. It's just, you wet the paper, especially if like me, you paint wet on wet. You put the water on the paper and then you just chuck pigment at it and loads of things happen. And if you just watch somebody doing it, you don't really know how it happens until you do it yourself, wet your paper, put a brush, put the color, and all these wonderful things just happen, the magic of watercolor. And I think you have to experience that, by yourself rather than just watch somebody do it.
Absolutely, because it's never the same. It kind of watercolor has a life of its own, doesn't it?
It has a life of its own, and you have to give it the space to work that magic. If you try to control it too much, then you might as well work in acrylics or gouache, or it has that unique ability to do its own thing. And if you give it the space to create that magic, it will. But you mustn't try to restrain it too much. You mustn't try to control it too much, which is why I like wet on wet, is because it gets that freedom to do all these wonderful things for me, which I love watching.
I know, but your paintings are so well, they look precise, but you say you allow the watercolor to do its thing. So it seems like an oxymoron because yours they're so controlled, but yet they're free. So
It's because the outline is precise, but within those lines, it's not. Within those lines, it's the random of the washes, but the outline is very precise, so it looks like it's neat and precise. Because also there's no background, so it's cut to white, so it looks even neater. But within those lines, it's complete chaos. It's just chucking pigments and just like the tulip you're going to show a little bit later on. It was the first time I was mixing Nicola's yellow with Pearland red, so I didn't know what was going to happen. So I love doing that. I love experimenting all the time, and if you look at the washes closely within that very precise line, you're going to see that it's very varied colors because I mix straight on the paper as well. I don't mix my colors on the palette most of the time. I actually wet the paper and just put different colors on the paper and let them mix. So that adds even more variation to it and even more unpredictability because you
Well,
don't know
that
how
sounds like so much fun, just letting it controlled chaos.
yeah, exactly. That's a very good description of it. Controlled chaos.
I'd love to be able to have more controlled chaos because my watercolor seems to be just chaos without the control.
But
Wonderful.
so, yeah,
Yeah.
I do give assignments, and I like people to experience this by themselves, and then I do a lot of feedback as well to finish once people have done the work and once they've experimented and once they finish their painting. I think feedback is quite important as well, so that people can learn from their mistakes and do better next time. But also something I think that students tend not to do so much. Learning from your mistakes is really easy because you know if you've messed up something and you know how to do it differently next time. But I think what's important as well is learn from the things that you've done well, and it's a lot less obvious. And I think students sometimes forget to do that. But if you do something well, don't just ignore it. Actually analyze it as well. See why it went well, and then take notes so that you can do that again and reproduce that process. So learn from your mistakes, but also learn from the good things that you've done.
Oh, that's a very good point. Yes.
Mm,
Yeah.
it's
We
less
tend
obvious.
we tend to focus on what went wrong rather than what went well.
And I
Yeah.
think what's good with Mastrius as well is that we've got groups with several people in it. I think it goes up to 8. Um,
Yes. Yes.
maybe.
Very small groups. So it's very intimate and it's lots of time to ask questions and make sure that the concepts are fully understood and to work on what the students are interested in.
Yes. But also, it's good that it's a group rather than a one-on-one because I think peer feedback is important as well. And having feedback from other people in the group, not only from the mentor and the navigator, but from the other people in the group that have experienced the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And also, when I give feedback to one person, it will probably help the other people in the group as well because it's something that they might have one. So I think having a group dynamics is really good as well.
Yes, because I've learned heaps from, what other people have done
Yeah.
and, for ideas and just, the questions that they ask that I might not think to
Yeah.
ask.
You might not think of asking them, and also sometimes people don't dare to ask them. The
Yes.
couple of times when I do a workshop and I've got 8 people around me, and one of them starts a question, but it's probably a silly question, and it's not a silly question. And when they ask that, the other people go, "Oh yes, I would love to know that," but they didn't dare to ask it because they thought it was a stupid question. So
That's so true. Yeah.
braver and asking that question that nobody
Yeah.
else would ask.
But you seem very down to earth and open, so very easy to ask questions to.
Oh yeah.
So that's wonderful. Yeah. And so you do a lot of botanical work, we see, which is absolutely stunning. Do you work on any other types of projects that's a little bit different?
Yes, I do. I started doing seascapes as well, which I really enjoy. Um, that was inspired by some wonderful holidays on the beach, and also I go to the beach almost every week here, and I just love the colors in the sea and the sky. But also, I get commissions all the time that that come out of the blue. And recently, I had a very interesting one from a luthier who restores antique harps, and they are really large instruments. They're much taller than me, like proper full-size harps. And he had some that were damaged on the front where all the ornaments are, and he asked me if I could repaint them. And that was really interesting because I had to work in a different medium. And I had to do ornaments from the 1700s, like burlesque and rococo and all these sort of things. So that was completely different for me. And I had to paint figures as well, dancers and
Should I
musicians.
show some of these pictures?
Yeah, please do.
Okay, let me show these pictures. Just hang on one second. While you're talking, go ahead.
So this is half of the front of the harp. So this is mirrored on the other side, and the strings are in the middle. So I had to work on this type of ornament and use a very limited palette that would have been on the instruments at the time, because obviously I had to do that in periods. So I think this particular harp was from the early 1700s. And so do designs of the period, use colors of the period, and I had to work with ink, which I usually don't do. They were colored inks. Usually I work in watercolor. Sometimes I work in ink, but it's just a black ink outline. These ones were actually colored inks in a range of turquoise and sort of stone colors, and that was really interesting. I really enjoyed doing that. It's really exciting when you have a new project like this. You know, an hour before I got that email, I didn't know I was going to do this, and then suddenly it became my full-time thing for a few weeks of just working on those designs on this antique harp. And the next one I'm going to do for him, I'm going to have to paint in oils, which is going to be interesting as well. And I'm going to have to paint for it's a harp from the mid 1700s, and it used to belong to Marie Antoinette. So that's a very exciting project, but also quite nerve-wracking because I'm going to actually paint on her instrument. So that is going to be a little bit worrying, but I'm really looking forward to do it as well. And then this one, the one you're showing now, is how that commission ended up influencing my own work. Because after I finished that one harp where I did the peacock and the dancers, and I went back to doing my own work, my own paintings, and I ended up doing this project. So that was an ink one as well. And I did I ordered more colored inks because I had enjoyed working with them. And I did some ink tests with different colored inks and mixing them with watercolor rather than just working in inks. And this is how I ended up doing this. And halfway through this project, I realized that I had done the background in turquoise and I had a lot of sort of neutral beigey colors in there. And I realized just how much the harp project had influenced me without realizing it. And then in my normal work, in things that I do every day, like this one, that ends up being quite different from what you showed in the introduction. Because
Yes, yeah.
of that harp job that came through and just opened another sort of inspiration for me, you know, just working in the background in my mind and making me want to do something a little bit different. So I love doing commissions like this that are unexpected because I like experimenting all the time.
Yeah,
I
there's
think
still so much detail in there. It's absolutely gorgeous. Yeah.
there's still detail and there's still the botanical side. I mean, the hydrangea is botanically correct, and so is the ivy, but it's a lot looser. Again, there's the precise line with the loose washes in the middle of them, and there's a rabbit. So,
Yes.
but that
Oh,
is actually my rabbit. I mean, she's no longer with us, but that's Penelope. She's a rabbit that we rescued and we had for a few years. She lived in my studio. She didn't have a cage. She was litter trained, and she was
oh, beautiful. Oh, that makes it so sweet. Oh, how nice.
very special to paint her.
Yeah. Oh, that's gorgeous. Yeah. Just the more you look at it, the more interesting it is. It's just all kinds of delightful things to.
Yeah, so the influence by that one, I wanted to do something in the arts and crafts style, you know, William Morris and his whole team of designer. So that would be probably like a fabric design or something. But that was my own work changing because of a commission that I had to do that was completely different, and just experimenting after that. So this is something I will encourage in my group as well, is for my students to experiment with things and just not feel limited with one medium or one style or one method of doing things, but being open to just trying something else and just experimenting.
And so what kind of inks did you use?
So the ones I did on the harp were fountain pen inks. They dissolve in water. And the ones that I did for my own work, I ordered some different inks that were acrylic inks that would not dissolve. So the line would stay more precise. And I did lots of colors. I mean, if I show you, I did one with a pale gray ink and a white rabbit.
Oh,
Then I did one with colored inks and a black rabbit. And then I did one with black ink and a black rabbit. So I just took a sample of the painting and then tried different combinations. And again, this is something that I will encourage people to do in my group, is just experimenting with something before you decide on the final piece. So
Right.
that, because this actually surprised me. In the end, I didn't choose the one that I thought I was going to choose.
Oh, oh, isn't that interesting?
I did. I was very surprised by my choice at the end because I thought that would be the least likely to happen. So when you actually see it, in reality, it's different from seeing it in your mind, and
Yes.
and you might actually make decisions that you didn't think you would. So I do quite a lot of preparation in my work, but then um, after the preparation, after the painting is planned, it's just evolves and it's just on its own. So even with the most planned project, I always end up doing something slightly different because things happen during the painting process that make me change direction. So you
Yes.
mustn't be too rigid. Even if you plan a lot, you mustn't be too rigid with it. You must be open to changes happening.
I love that. Yes, because I do some thumbnails and sometimes then you make decisions along the way that it's a little bit different.
It's different. And then again, because the watercolor is going to make its own decisions along the way, you have to adapt to what the watercolor's done.
Yes, the
Um,
watercolor dictates what's going to happen.
yes.
And so, do you have any samples of your seascapes?
It's in the living room, so I can get it, but it's going to take a minute for me to get it.
Okay, just while you're getting that, I'll just talk about Mastrius. Yeah, so at the end of this, if anyone joins, I can give you a little bit of a tour of the Mastrius website. If you go there, there is oh, a find the mentor, and then there's more information about Sandrine's that was fast, Sandrine's mentorship. So I'll talk about that at the end. So go ahead. We'd love to see the seascapes. Oh, beautiful. And so is this all watercolor?
No, this one is in acrylics on a canvas,
Okay.
and it's my first seascape, so I painted my first waves.
Oh, beautiful. Nice.
I did this, and the reason it was in the living room is because it's on the mantelpiece, because that was inspired by a wonderful holiday I had last year in Saint-Jean-de-Mont in the Atlantic coast in France, and that's the beach that we could see from our window where we walked and had a swim in there every day. So it means a lot to me. It's such a wonderful memory.
Yeah.
So if
Oh,
I
that's
did my first seascape last year at the end of the year.
wonderful. So you do a little bit of acrylic too.
Well, I hadn't done any acrylics in years, but I thought for that, because I wasn't painting on my own with that, I had my goddaughter coming to my studio. She wanted to do a painting for her boyfriend, and so I thought, well, we thought we were going to paint together, and because she was doing hers in acrylics, I did mine in acrylics as well, and we just
Ah.
spent the day painting together, and she did her painting. I did.
Nice, nice. Okay. And let's see, is there anything else we'd like to talk about before you go into the demo? You were going to explain the steps of creating a
Yeah,
painting.
the steps of creating a painting. So, do you have did you download the pictures of the tulip with the different steps?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you show these, I could go through the process of
Okay. Just one moment.
I can start with something that is not on the picture, which is the inspiration. I think it's really important to have inspiration when you start a
Yeah.
painting.
Okay. Just
Because if you look at a subject and you think, yeah, well, I suppose I could paint that, it doesn't really work out. So I think, it's important to be inspired by a painting, by a subject before you do your painting. So once I find my subject that I'm inspired with and I want to paint, I do a sketch in the sketchbook. So that's the sketch with all the colors that I'm going to use. So I have a very big palette. I have about 40 colors in my palette. I used to paint with a very reduced palette of about I think I had about 7 colors because I had a pink on top of 2 of each primary. And then when I wrote my first book, I tested more than 150 different colors because it's a book about color and about pigments. And I just discovered a whole world of amazing pigments. And I thought it was a shame not to play with them, really, because they're just wonderful. You know, like really good pigments, like transparent, light fast, saturated. Loads of them are really good. So I expanded my palette at some point and I ended up with about 40 colors. But within each painting, I usually have about 5 or 6 colors, no more than that, because I don't want them to clash and turn to mud. So this is the sketch with the colors that I use, the shadow mix that I'm using, and then I do a quick tone study that I'm going to use when I come to the watercolor paper. So that's the first step, and that's the plan, really. That sheet here has got all my plan in it, and that's the bits that might change as I go along.
Interesting. Yeah. All the names of the colors are there, and your shadows.
Yes, yeah. And my tone study, and then I trace this and I transfer it to watercolor paper.
Oh, hang on one second.
So that's the painting on the watercolor paper. And the first thing I paint on the watercolor paper is the shadows. So I use the shadow mix that I prepared in my palette. And I paint the shadows wet on wet, one petal at a time. And in the end, I get this grisaille painting in watercolor, ready to put the color on top.
Oh,
And start building up the color washes on top of that.
yeah, that looks like it could just be a painting on its own.
Yeah. But then I start painting the color washes. So I use only transparent paints because obviously the shadows have to show through them. So if I use an opaque paint, I'm not going to see what's underneath. So there's no point in painting things underneath. So I do loads of layers, but they're all transparent and they show the layers underneath it. So that's a couple, at this stage, there's a couple of yellow washes. And I've done the mixes straight on the paper. So there's 2 different yellows in there. So I wetted the petal, dropped some Hansa yellow light towards the bottom, and then Nicola's yellow towards the top, and just let them merge in the water towards the center. So there's 2 yellows in there. And then in the petal in the center, I started using some red as well, some Perilane red. So that's in the process of layering my colors. And then I just build up those washes until I've got enough color on there.
And there's a beautiful shadow between the petals. Is that on purpose? Is that just the magic of the watercolor?
Well, the shadows are placed on purpose because I have a light direction and it needs to make sense. It needs to read well, otherwise it's going to look flat. So I'm reserving the highlights. So the highlights are wetted but not painted. So there's water on the highlights, but there is no paint.
Ah, but there's a kind of a dark line between the petals. Is
Yeah,
that?
yeah, that's the building up of the shadow color, and then building up a bit more yellow and red on that as well. It's the cast shadow from one petal to another to show that it's on top
Right.
one.
Okay, that's beautiful.
That's painting the negative space really behind the edges of the petal. So that's building up a bit more red, the Perilane red, and some Perilane violet at the tips. So that's the process of just building up the washes until there's enough color on there. So at this point, it's still wet on wet. There's no dry brush yet. But then once I've got all my washes, I do a little bit of dry brush for the details at the end.
And do you need to work fairly quickly to keep it wet?
Well, it depends on the weather very much. So it's different with every painting session. If the weather is humid and it's raining outside and there's a lot of humidity in the air, they will take forever to dry. So it takes longer because you have to wait for one wash to dry before you do the next one. So it takes a bit longer. But on a hot, dry day, you don't have a lot of time to work because the washes dry really quickly. So,
And what kind of paper are you using?
so this is Fabriano Artistico. And because I use a lot of water, I use a very heavy paper. So it's a 640 grams. So when when you see it sideways, I don't know if you can see that, but it's like card. It's a very, very thick paper. because if I use a thinner paper, it buckles because of the amount of water. I use a lot of water.
Okay, we'll have to show us that the paper again when I stop sharing because they can't see it. And so this is the last one, I think, is it, that with the
No, it's not finished yet at this stage. All the wet on wet washes are done, and it's waiting for the dry brush detail. So the dry brush detail is going to be the veining. And if you look at the painting, the process is probably about, I would say, 95% wet on wet and then 5% dry brush at the end. And this is where the detail comes in. You know, you said earlier, my paintings look so detailed. That comes with the dry brush, where obviously you have a lot more control. So as I paint a few veins on top of the washes, but not that much because I don't want to hide all the washes I've done underneath, because I like the look of wet on wet washes. I don't want to hide that with a lot of dry brush on top. So I add a little bit of detail, a few veins, just for the information, to give a little bit of texture, but not that much.
Yeah, allowing the watercolor to do its thing certainly makes it look real and not, you know, contrived.
It makes it look more natural, yeah.
Yes. Oh, it's absolutely gorgeous.
Thank you. So you see there's no dry brush. Oh, is there on this one? Yeah, I think on this one there's a bit of dry brush. There's a few veins.
Yeah, to get those very fine lines.
Just a few veins in red to show the direction of the veining. So yeah, there's a bit of dry brush on that one. And then after the dry brush, I usually do a final glaze, wet again, because I think this one is finished, isn't it? Yeah, because if you do some dry brush and then you just leave it, it kind of stands on top of the washes and it doesn't look like it's part of the painting so much. So by doing a final color glaze with a edge of the dry brush strokes a little bit, just blends it a little bit in, and then it's part of the texture rather than just sitting on top.
Okay, and what is your glaze? How do you prepare a glaze?
So the glaze is just a very thin wash of color. So I prepare in the palette in a well, I put quite a lot of water in it and just a single color in it. And I just cover the petal wet with that color. But it's very, very thin because it doesn't add a lot of color. It just blends in the dry brush and just adds a sort of final glow to it. But at this stage, usually the color is done. The color is where it should be. So a glaze is a very thin wash with not a lot of color in it.
And
A soft brush, because if you use a scratchy brush, you're going to lift what you've done before. You don't want to lift what's underneath. You don't want to dissolve the dry brush. You just want to blend it.
and so you would do green on the petals and then a yellow on, like a green on the leaves and yellow on the petals?
So the glaze on that one was Nicolazo yellow on all the petals, but not on the highlights. And then on the green, I mixed a more yellowy green, so lighter, a bit similar to the green that's on the stalk. And I glazed the whole leaf with that. And if you can see the highlight that goes down the leaf, down the length of the leaf, that was an accident. I didn't plan to put a highlight there. It's just after my first wash, I ended up with a lighter zone here going down, just the way the paint dried. And that's the kind of thing that happens without me deciding it for it to happen. And I thought, actually, I really like it. So I'm going to try and keep it.
Yes.
So when I did my other washes after that, I tried not to add too much paint to that part but I didn't plan that. It's something that just happened. It's something that the watercolor did when it dried. It just left that streak, which looks like a bit of light coming down the leaf.
Oh, that's so interesting to know. That's great. Yeah, that really makes it interesting having that little line of light.
Yeah, so, you know, it's what I was talking about earlier on with the magic of watercolor. It's your attitude to it as well. If it does something that you haven't planned, you know, when it dried and did that, I could have panicked and thought, oh my goodness, I didn't plan this. What am I going to do? How am I going to cover it up? But instead I thought, interesting. I did not plan this. Now, what do I do with it? And I just go with the flow. If it's what it did, that's what it did. Just go with it.
Yes, beautiful. Okay, and I think that's it.
Yeah, I think, yeah, that's the painting finished. So shall we do a bit of a demonstration?
Yes, let's do a demonstration. Yeah.
I'm
Good to
going to
see it
join
in
the
action.
meeting. Yeah, I'm going to join the meeting with my phone, which is over my painting table.
Okay.
So I need to mute this one, don't I? I need to mute my computer. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And we'll just talk about Mastrius while we're waiting for you to set up. So like we said in the beginning, there's a maximum of 8 students in each one. Let me show you. Hang on, I will show you the site.
Enjoying the video? Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the bell to be notified when new Mastrius videos are added.
If you go to mastrius.com and you can search for mentors, and I'll show you that afterwards, but search for Sandrine, and this is her page, and she specializes in watercolor, ink, mixed media, and print making. And you can check out her website and her Instagram and YouTube channels. And it says a little bit about Sandrine and shows you some of her artwork that she's done, the botanical work. And her expertise is in color and composition, demos, and art critiques, which is always super valuable, you know, to have some honest critique on your own work, teaching you how to self-critique, what supplies and tools to use, and also the business side of things, studio time, how to create prints and reproductions. And if you'd like to join the mentorship, it's the first Tuesday of every month. The next one is May the 7th, and this will show up in your time zone when you log on. I'm in Pacific time, but everything is, Mastrius is centered out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. So it's most of the things are set in mountain time, but on this page, it will show in your time zone. And if you'd like to join that, that would be wonderful. And here's a little bit more about the artist. So to get to this page, if you go to the Mastrius site, this is where it all starts. And it'll show you a little bit about what Mastrius is all about. This is Julie, and she's our founder and a beautiful artist at the same time. And so the connections and the community through Mastrius is just incredible. I have met so many wonderful people and learned just from other events, because there's weekly events, more than one, but there's always at least one main weekly event that you can learn from various artists, and there's always tips to be had. So it tells you a little bit about how it works, your experience. The community is the big thing here, and the mentoring from master artists. And
Okay, am I in?
yes,
Yes.
Yeah.
You can see my painting table?
Yes, I can.
Yeah. You can hear me okay?
Yes.
All right. So
Okay.
just let me know when you're ready for me to start.
Okay, I just want to show under the top here, under mentorship, you can choose your mentor. I'll just finish this. And so under here, you can identify what stage you're at: beginner, aspiring, emerging. And then you can take a quiz to find out what stage you're at. You can search by name here, so we can Sandrine, type in Sandrine's name, and that will take us to her page. Or else you can filter by all kinds of different things, your medium, whether you want to be oil or acrylic or watercolor, what day of the week, and all kinds of filters to find your the mentor that suits for you. But hopefully you'll like Sandrine and join her mentorship. That would be wonderful. I'm certainly excited to have the group get started on May the 7th. Okay, so let's come back to you. So Sandrine, go take it away.
Take it away. So I've prepared the demonstration to show you the layering of the shadows with the first wash of color. So again, I have my sketchbook here with the preparation. So I've got a quick sketch of a tulip with a tone study on it, with the colors that I'm going to use. So I've changed my mind here about which yellow I was going to use. I started with Hansa Yellow Light, but I decided to go with Mayan Yellow because I'm painting this flower, and the yellow at the base of the petal. There's usually yellow at the base of a tulip petal, but it's not Hansa Yellow Light. It's a lot more orangey than that. So I needed some of the Mayan yellow for that. And the pink is a mix of quinacridone pink and quinacridone coral, which again, I'm going to mix straight on the paper instead of mixing on the palette. So I like to work from life because when you work from life, you can really see the texture properly rather than working from a photo. And sometimes when you're not sure what color to use, if you look on the inside, it shows you better what color to use, because by transparency, you can see the colors that are on the inside on the petals sometimes. So you can feel the texture, you can really look at the color. It's just so much better to paint from life. You really have a better feel for your subject.
Oh, we can see that. Yeah, that what a difference to be able to touch it and move it around.
Yeah, and sometimes the smell as well is lovely. You know, when you paint a beautiful rose, the smell is part of the inspiration as well. So that's my tulip. So tulips
so I'm
move a
interested
lot.
to how you create your shade colors.
So my shade color, when I started painting, I looked into shading and how to do the tone. I ended up deciding to follow the method that Leonardo da Vinci follows, which is painting the shadows first in a grisaille and then painting the colors on top, because he's an artist that I admire a lot, obviously, and I think he's probably my main inspiration, him and Albrecht Dürer. And I thought, well, you know, if it's good enough for Leonardo da Vinci, it's probably good enough for me. If he thinks that method works, then it probably does. The difference is Leonardo da Vinci was working in oil, so he was mixing white and black to make his gray, which I can't do in watercolor because you don't really use white and black in watercolor. So I looked into different ways of having gray, and ready-made grays usually have black pigments in them. They're ready mixed grays using a black as a base with another color. And black is a little bit dusty usually, and I think it's too dusty for botanical work. It makes everything a little bit sooty and dusty, and you lose the vibrancy that you would get on a flower like this. So I didn't want to use a ready-made gray. I've looked at what other artists throughout history used to mix their gray, and I couldn't find a recipe that I thought worked for everything. So I ended up inventing a method which I call harmonic shadows, which is using colors that I already have in my painting to mix a different shadow color for every painting I do. And that way, my shadow color is always in harmony with the rest of my painting, because I do not introduce any different pigments into the painting. I use the ones that I already have. So for this particular one, my shadow color is Tallow Blue Red shade mixed with my yellow, Mayan Yellow, mixed with my main red, which is quinacridone coral. So in order to do the shadow color, you need one of each primary. If you mix any blue with any red with any yellow, you have one of each primary, you're always going to get a gray. So, or a black if you concentrate it a lot. So if you see the one that I did for the ones that you showed earlier, that was the one that you showed on the screen. My shadow color for that was Tallow Blue Red shade, Perilene Red, and Nickel Azure Yellow. So you can see it's a different shadow color from this one. And that one will work for that tulip. And this one will work for this tulip.
That's so interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, that makes so much sense, and lovely how it would harmonize.
Yeah, exactly. I think it makes sense. I mean, it makes sense to me anyway. So this is the way I work with it. So for this one, I've got Tallow Blue Red shade, quinacridone coral, which is my main red, and Mayan Yellow. I'm not using Hansa Yellow Light in the end. I tried it, but I didn't think it was the right yellow. So in my palette, I've got that mix concentrated here. But for white, pale yellow, and pale pink, flower like this one, this is going to be too dark. So on the other side, I've diluted it with more water. So I've taken some of that, put it in the middle, added more water. So that's going to make a paler version of it, which is this one. So I've prepared this. This is one I prepared earlier. I've traced that one and transferred 2 of them. On this one, the shadows are already painted. And on this one, I'm just going to show you how I do it. So painting 1 petal at a time. I'll start on this one. So at the moment, I'm just using pure water. And I'm using a fairly large brush. It's a number 6 to add the water so that I've got plenty of water there. Right up to the outline.
And this is on your Fabriano Artistico paper.
Yeah, 640 grams.
Okay.
And with every wash, whether it's the shadows or the color, I'm always gonna wet the whole petal. Even if the shadows are only here, I'm still wetting the whole petal, because if I only wet here and then I put the gray will float to the surface and then it will travel, and where it meets the dry paper, it will settle down and do a line. I'm going to have a hard line, and I don't want a hard line around my shadow. I want a soft line. So I'm wetting the whole petal, even if the shadows are not going to go on the whole thing, so that I don't get a hard line at the edge of my shadow area. So that's evenly wet. Now I've got my brush picking up some of the color, and I'm going to drop in some color for the shadows. So at the top here, my tulip is going to be pink, so I need quite a strong shadow. But then as I go down, it's going to be white and yellow. So I need a paler shadow here. And it works out okay if I don't reload my brush, because with my brush fully loaded, I've done the shadows here. And then my brush is unloading the color on the paper. So it's got less and less color on here, meaning that it's getting paler and paler. So it's actually doing that on its own without me needing to do anything to it. And then with a clean damp brush, I'm just tidying up the edges a bit. And then maybe breaking down a little bit that flat wash in the direction of the petals, of the veins, sorry, on the petal. And then leave it to dry. So it's really important as well not to fiddle too long with your washes, because the pigment needs to travel and settle where it wants to go. Because it will naturally settle quite evenly. But if you keep on working your wash for too long, you're moving that pigment around too much, and it will end up in little heaps of not settling properly, and then you won't have smooth washes. So just put your paint on there and then leave it be. I'll just do another petal to show that a second time, and then I'll move on to the next one. So here again, wetting my whole petal. And I've prepared the other one because I won't be able to put any color on here for a while. Because
So you do let it, even though you do wet and wet, you do let it dry between your layers.
yeah, you need to do, because if I was to, even now, the shininess is gone, it's just a slight sheen. If I add some water in there, I'm going to get some backgrounds. It's not going to dry evenly. So you really need to leave it to dry thoroughly. And at the moment, because I tell you, it's been raining so much in England, it's just endless. So there's a lot of moisture in the air. That's going to take a long time to dry. That's why I prepared that one, to show you the first layer of color, because I knew I wasn't going to be able to demonstrate on this one once I've done this. So more gray. I need to be a bit darker than that. It's a bit more shadow on this one because my light is coming from the left side. So this one's getting a little bit of shadow as the petal is turning away, but this one is pretty much all in the shadow, apart from a little bit of reflected light on the right. Okay, that's enough paint. And then just tidying up the edge a little. Sometimes, well, actually not sometimes, all the time when you put the paint down, it feathers a little bit on the edge. You know, it goes a little bit everywhere. So I like to just, with a damp brush, tidy up my edge a little bit and then leave it to dry. So I'm gonna leave it here. And you can see that this one is slightly different from the other one because although I'm following the same tone study, obviously because it's wet and wet, it doesn't exactly ends up in the same place every time. And the reason I do a tone study, especially with tulips, is because tulips are very lively and they move a lot. So by just putting this one under the light on my painting table, it's going to start to open. It was outside and it's quite cold today. And then I'm bringing it into the studio in the full light with a warmer temperature. It's going to open very quickly. So by doing a tone study, I have a snapshot of what the light is at that moment in time. And then if the tulip moves and the shadows change, it doesn't matter because I've got this as a reference. So when I do the tone, usually I ignore the subject and I follow my tone study. And then I come back to the subject when it's time to paint the colors.
And do you ever take a picture of your sample to maintain that stage and time of openness?
Not usually. If I know that I'm going to finish the painting before the subject dies on me, I don't usually take pictures. But sometimes if it's a much larger painting and I know I'm not going to be able to manage to finish the painting before the subject disappears, I can take a few reference photos, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. But I don't use them for the color because the color is never just completely right with a photo.
Yeah.
And the camera makes a lot of decisions for you as well that, you know, you just don't have the same amount of information. So with my notes, usually they're more useful than a photo would be.
Right. Okay. And then that little shadow between the petals, you just...
Yeah, so that's the cast shadow. I can't do it on this one yet because these two are still wet. So I probably won't be able to do this one in this particular demonstration because it's going to take too long. But it was the same process, wetting that petal here and adding the shadow as a negative shape behind this petal. So this petal is casting a shadow on this one because my light is coming from here. And this is the shadow that's going to give some depth to the painting, showing that this petal is behind this one. So that the cast shadows are really important.
Yes, that makes it come alive.
And reflected light as well, I really like, you know, adding a bit of reflected light on the dark side, because my light is coming here, so the shadows are here. But a subject is never completely isolated in space. There's always other things around it, reflecting some of the light towards it. So even on the shadow edge, you can see here, there's little bits of reflected light from whatever is here, reflecting light onto it. So
yeah,
you can see the light changing.
The paper.
Yeah.
The reflection of the paper.
Yeah. So now I'm going to do a wash of color on, and I'm going to work on half a petal this time because there's not a lot of color in the area of the central veins. So I'm re-wetting. So now because I did this one much earlier today, it is dry, so I can re-wet it. And because my washes are so thin, they're not going to dilute again. They've sunk into the texture of the paper. I can do this with my brush. I'm not going to remove the paint that's under there. So I can re-wet everything. And I'm going to have a highlight on the edge here, but I'm putting water on this too. So even on the light, again, because if I don't wet the highlight, I'm going to have a hard edge around it. And it's not going to look like a highlight. It's going to look like there's a hole in my petal. You need a soft edge around your highlights.
That's really interesting that you can re-wet after, you know, it dries again and not disturb the watercolor underneath.
No, you are right. You can go. Because my washes are quite thin. I'm just trying to put the palette on the screen. So I've got my quinacridone pink here. So that's going to be in the center here. And it's going away from the vein. But I also have quinacridone coral. And this is what I was explaining earlier. I'm not mixing those two because there's the two colors in here. There's the pink and the coral. But I'm not going to mix them in the palette. I'm going to mix them straight on the paper. So they're going to not mix evenly, and they're going to make a lot of really nice variation in color. So that color goes right up to the edge, but it's lighter along the edge where there's a highlight. So I'm going to put some on the edge, but leave that unpainted.
And I notice you're using a very small brush for this.
For this I am, because it's not a very big petal, and I don't want that coral to go into the highlight. So the less paint I have on my brush, the more chances I have of the paint not spreading too far. So there's several ways to do it. There's using a small brush because it doesn't carry a lot of paint, so it can't flood the whole thing. But also using a synthetic brush rather than a real animal hair brush, because synthetic brushes carry less water, they're less absorbent, so they carry less water and they carry less paint. So they're a lot easier to use with that kind of method. You can see here my highlight has stayed okay. The paint hasn't gone too far. And again, I'm not working that highlight for very long. I've put down the pink, I've put down the coral, now I'm leaving it to dry. So it's going to settle one way or another. The two colors are going to mix together, and I won't really know what it looks like until it's dry. So then when I come back to it and I see what is done, I will decide what to do next. If I need to add more color, if I need to add more pink or more coral or a bit of both or just one of them. Or one thing you can't really do is remove color, because it starts damaging the paper, it gets fluffy, and you lose the vibrancy and you lose the freshness, which in botanical especially is quite important to have the freshness. So it's better to use maybe not as much color as you know you're going to need and layer more than just load it with a lot of paint and then you find that you've got too much. And if you remove it, you're going to make a mess. So this is paler than this at this stage, but you see the color is getting there already. But it is paler. I'm going to need to do maybe 3 washes of color if I keep
So
on
that would mean
intensity.
3 layers of drawing in between, waiting for it to dry, and then coming back again.
And then re-wet.
So this must take a very long time if you're constantly waiting between layers for everything to dry.
It does, except while that one's drying, and I can work on this one, and then while this one's drying, I can work on the stalk. And I very rarely have just a little tulip head like this. I would have a composition with more things. So there's always an area where I can work on something else while I wait for something to dry and while I wait to be able to come back to it.
And do you ever use a hair dryer, or is that a no?
No, it's a no, because it would push the pigment that's floating on the water, and then it doesn't dry naturally, it doesn't settle naturally. So no, a hair dryer is a no for me. Okay, so I think that's probably it for the demonstration. Shall I go back to the computer?
Yes.
Okay, so I'm going to leave the call with this one because the sound was playing up earlier, wasn't it? So I'm going to leave here and then come back to my computer.
Okay. Well,
Right.
that was oops.
Does that work?
Yes.
Yes, good.
Oh, a little bit of an echo.
I can't hear the echo from here.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully it's not. It's okay now. I think it was just.
Okay.
Well, that was certainly insightful. Lots of little tips in there. I made notes for myself because, yeah. So how you do that? Wow, very interesting. And it looks simple. So what I have to do, of course, is go and try it.
Yes. Yes.
And so a question for you is, do people need to be into botanical work to join this group?
No, not necessarily. I think we're going to focus probably more on watercolor techniques and color mixing rather than just specifically botanical. I mean, color mixing, the reason I paint botanical mainly is because it's the type of subject where I can experiment with the most colors, because in flowers you can find all the colors. But my big passion really is color mixing and watercolor. So that can apply to any type of subject.
So people can come in with any kind of subject interest, and they learn lots and lots of tips.
Yeah. Yeah.
Beautiful. Okay. And so, yeah, we're just about to wrap it up here because we're at the hour, and
Yes.
this has been absolutely incredible. So again, Sandrine has a mentorship going on Mastrius, and it's the first Tuesday of, where's my notes? First Tuesday of every month, starting on May the 7th. And so we'd love to see you there. And so then where can people follow you?
Well, I've got a website, www.sandrinemaugy.com. I've got a YouTube channel called Atelier Sandrine Maugy. So the YouTube channel and the website, you can subscribe for free, and you can see all the tutorials. And I do a lot of testing of different colors as well, and testing of materials as well, which I really like. I've got an Instagram account, Sandrine Maugy, and I've got also a Patreon account. So this one is a subscription, so it's not free, but I do a post every week. And like this week, I'm posting tonight the tutorial of the tulip that you showed earlier on. So I do a post every week on Patreon as well. And that's about it.
I will just quickly share your website and your Instagram, because I like to see it. So yeah, so check out all that stuff, and definitely come and join us at Mastrius, and we'd love to see you there. I'm so excited about this, and I'm increasing my watercolor skills with all your techniques. So that's wonderful. And yeah, okay. So is there anything else you'd like to add before we go?
No, I'm just looking forward to starting my group and meeting everybody, and starting on our little, experimentation together, and seeing what people come up to. I chose a group which is an aspiring artist group, so there's people who don't have a lot of experience. I just love to see people discovering all these things, at the beginning of their watercolor journey and their painting journey, when they just discover the whole magic of it. It's really nice to share that with my students and with my mentees. So I'm really looking forward to this, and meeting everybody in the group and working with you, also having a look at what you're doing.
Yeah, I know. I can't wait. I'm going to go and try out what you just showed us, doing that wet and wet technique. And yeah, I can't wait to start that. So again, we can see the replay of this if you want to watch that demonstration again on the Mastrius YouTube channel. It will be posted up there shortly, within a few days. So that would be wonderful to watch again, just to see that technique. So, well, thank you, Sandrine, for your time. This has
welcome. Thank you.
This has been absolutely delightful. So hope to see more people there, and see you on May the 7th. And or not any, you can join actually, if you're watching this recording after May the 7th, you can join at any time. So it's just, the entries are always open as long as it's a maximum of 8 people. And yeah, so if it doesn't fill up too quickly, great. All right. Well, you have a wonderful day, and I hope the rain stops. Maybe the rain's growing all those beautiful tulips for you.
Why should they not like it?
Oh, that's true. Not if they're already starting to flower.
Oh, they look very sorry for themselves. They were droopy and grumpy. And
Yeah.
they're not happy.
Well, we're in the stage where we're just starting to sprout, so we need the rain now to get the seeds to germinate.
Yeah. All right.
Okay, great. Thank you again, and we'll see you soon.
Okay.
Okay, bye.
Bye.